Those who have worked at Disney World, what behind the scenes stories do you have that the public doesn't see? NSW. If you hear an announcement over the park-wide sound system looking for a specific person, it is something very important. Announcements like that have a chain of approval before Disney will allow the magic illusion to be broken. But it's not always bad news, like informing families of a death. I've done several park announcements to find someone to inform them an organ donation was matched. A medical courier was on their way to Orlando, and they needed to get to the hospital ASAP. It was always startling when you heard the park PA go up for something other than a good news. Arts and crafts time has been extended for 4 hours today. I think I've left a comment similar to this before, but I briefly trained for Kilimanjaro safaris at Disney World. At one point on the ride, you go over a bridge with crocodiles underneath. As I was riding with no one in the truck other than my trainer, she felt free to tell me that if anyone were to stand up and fall into the crocodile pit, I was to drive away immediately so that others wouldn't have to see the carnage or try to rescue the person. The crocodiles are apparently fed from that bridge, and anything that drops from there is food to them, and they are surprisingly fast. Also, Devine had a mouth on her. Everyone in the call centers has given a stage name, so no two agents have the same name to the guests. Most unique stage names I can remember: Cotton, Casper, Arizona, Lucinda. When you're in training they give you a selection of like 20 names to choose from, so you better hope you're one of the first ones to pick so you can get a normal name and not get stuck with Cotton FFS. Definitely wouldn't pick Cotton. Not an employee, but I have an interesting story about Disney. When I was 7, I went to Disney World. The third night we were there, I rolled out of my bed and cut my forehead on the nightstand. My mom came over to comfort me, not knowing I was bleeding quite profusely. She turned the light on when I wouldn't stop crying. She said it looked like a murder had taken place. Paramedics were called and the room was swarming with what I can only assume were Disney employees. After I was evaluated and patched up, I was taken to the gift shop around 2 AM with my mom and an employee. I got to choose 3 toys at no cost to my family. It was pretty incredible to be in the completely abandoned gift shop and being told I could have anything. When we returned back to the room 25 minutes later, all the blood was cleaned up. Guardrails were put on my bed, and a large basket of candy and other sweets were left on a table. Disney doesn't play around with customer service. On our family trip to Disney World, I was leaning over a railing looking down into some water. A few unreachable feet below I spot a tiny 1.5 ft to 2 ft alligator. Being from Africa and relatively unfazed with a slightly sharp swimming lizard, thought nothing of it. I called my mother over and said, "Look, an alligator. How cool." Sweet Jesus, was this a mistake? Not 2 seconds later, ears everywhere, man. A staff member was looking over the railing whispering on the radio. All heck broke loose in the most hushed professional way ever. We were escorted away on a golf cart and a huge section of the park was cordoned off. We were taken to a room where they were very apologetic for our negative experience and offered us a free day VIP, the works. So we said a big thank you and took what was offered. In future I will be smuggling other small harmless creatures in for free stuff. I also got stuck on the Big Thunder Mountain ride in Paris. That was handled in a much more French way. Jesus de Soleil, blow smoke in face. TL. DR. Disney World and tiny alligator being all chill equals free stuff. Slightly sharp swimming lizard. I love this description. I worked on the Great Movie Ride in Hollywood Studies for a while, and I can tell you all 22 minutes of your friendly tour guide speech is scripted to the very last letter. You get 3 days to learn your whole monologue, and all of the speeds, controls, stops, goes of the actual ride before going live as a tour guide. Most of those 3 days is spent in a room with your trainer reciting your script until you get every word right. If you accidentally say the word okay instead of alright, you start over from the beginning. Most tedious 3 days of my life. There's also one button on every car that, despite being really close to buttons you have to touch all the time, if pushed gets you fired immediately. I worked a cash register in Tomorrowland. A guy had a heart attack and died about 10 feet from me. I called it in as soon as I saw, but they already knew about it. I went on break shortly afterward and saw the family, literally behind the scenes, crying their eyes out. That never happens. Guests are never allowed behind the scenes. Except when somebody dies, I guess. Really kind of heartbreaking. On a positive note, they all got lifetime passes. You heard it here first, boys. Get a loved one to die in a Disney park for a quick backstage access and some lifetime passes. I went on a Keys to the Kingdom tour once and got to go down into the Utilities. It smells like rotten ketchup down there in a lot of places. You only see the part they want you to see, too. It's different outside of that small square block. Less clean. More smelly. I worked at Splash Mountain. Sometimes we had guests decide it was a great idea to hop out of the log because they didn't want to ride anymore. Well, we know about that. Every time. The ride is littered with motion sensors, pressure pads, the like. I have a photographic memory of the ride layout, and even I wouldn't be able to avoid being detected out of the log. The flashes don't happen very often. Actually, it's usually men with their shirts off. In this case, their ride photo is blanked out and they can't purchase it. We always had parents trying to sneak kids who didn't meet the height requirement. I do remember we had one family who kept trying for hours, thinking that the cast don't talk to each other about problematic parents. Ride evacuations were always interesting, but as long as you were strong and confident with the guests, they always listened. It's real important to walk them through what's going to happen and let them know you've done this more than enough times. I also teased them that they were going to get a backstage tour, but it was gonna be real brief. And as long as they didn't take pictures, they'd get a fast pass for their troubles. Every day was an event, but I loved every minute of it. I have an autistic cousin, and once while we were riding the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, it broke down. My cousin flipped out and Disney security literally appeared out of the walls. They took us into the back tunnels and into a freight elevator. Before we knew it, we're back outside. They were awesome in helping calm him as well. As a character, you are supposed to throw up in your mask if you are sick. Taking it off is not an option. You cover one eye with your hand and raise the other arm in the air to alert maintenance that you are not well. Also, if there is another character, same as you cannot, under any circumstances, be seen with them. You also must take a course to match signature style for autographs. I fainted from the heat while I was hugging him at WDW on my 8th birthday. I was traumatized and thought it was my fault. My grandparents have a photo of it somewhere. A friend of mine told me that the rules for workers at the European Disneyland were so strict that they took to calling it Mauseschwitz. When management got wind of this, they were told that anyone found using that name again would be fired. Apparently it was only a couple of hours before they were calling it Duckle. And if not, you still have to use Guffenhausen, where Elsa Grease Duck is head woman capo. My cousin worked at Disney in the 90s. I haven't heard a lot of his experience, but I have been told that the cable that Tinkerbell flies down to the castle on once snapped and she got a massive settlement, and Snow White gave him crabs. I need to talk to him more often. Interesting guy. I would have thought he'd get that from Ariel. Saw Mark Hamill backstage put on the guy who played Darth Vader's helmet. I wish we were allowed to take pictures. It was awesome. Compulsory. I never worked for Disney, but a friend did. Disney security listens to all Disney radio channels at all times for any distress call or other issue that is relevant to security. My friend, we'll call him Daniel because that's his name, worked for Disney World in Florida once. He worked in one of the resorts. I'm not quite sure what his job actually was, but his radio call sign was Movie Runner. He was walking between resorts one night, and near a pool he was cornered by a mama bobcat. Usually not a huge deal because the bobcat will eventually realize the person is not a threat, but he radioed the resort to let them know that he was being cornered by a bobcat. Next radio transmission. Without missing a beat, Movie Runner, this is Disney security base. We understand you are being cornered by a bobcat. Please remain calm. We have 2 units approaching your location. ETA 2 minutes. Please acknowledge. Over. TL. DR. Disney doesn't frick around with bobcats. I used to work as a candy maker at Disneyland. The candy store was on Main Street and there's a little pot of vanilla scent with a fan behind it to waft vanilla scent out onto the street where people are walking by. Once I saw a huge rat by the trash compactor when I was taking out some cardboard. Another time I was written up by my manager for accidentally dropping like $1,000 worth of caramel apples because a feral cat came up and scared the crap out of me. TLDR. There's a cat and mouse turf war backstage and they lure you into the candy store with a pot of vanilla. Once I saw a huge rat. Don't talk about Mickey like that, you cretin. I was an intern in a few of the engineering departments at the WDW resorts. I bounced around areas like park operations, warehouse operations, as well as engineering design. Nothing too crazy in my past experience, but some cool things I recall. The tunnels under the Magic Kingdom stink like trash and old food. There's a room in the tunnels where teams of people literally sit and watch attractions, restaurants, and crowded areas. They help support operations with things like estimating wait times, but also act as an overwatch for any other important information. While working in that room, we definitely poked fun at the tourists getting caught in the rain, especially the ones on Tom Sawyer's Island. Since you can only get on off by using a raft that would shut down during storms, large groups of people would get stuck on the island getting drenched. I was always dressed in a business casual attire. If I was out in the park collecting data or something, guests would assume that I was important since I was dressed up. Most of the time I was approached to get yelled at for waiting too long in lines. None of the control systems for the attractions are accessible remotely or via LAN. For security reasons, none of the attraction music turns off at night. It's real dark and creepy once everyone leaves the park. Since you can only get on off by using a raft that would shut down during storms, large groups of people would get stuck on the island getting drenched. That sounds like something you would do in Roller Coaster Tycoon. LMAO. Ex-character performer. I'm a 6-foot tall girl, so I did all of the tall characters like Goofy, Tigger, Captain Hook and like 10 other characters. I did a lot of the breakfast meet and greets as Tigger. My head had a small hole where the mouth was, so I would go from table to table drinking orange juice from the kids. The kids were amazed, and it helped me get over my hangovers from the night before. I was stuck in an elevator for 45 minutes backstage as Tigger. Doing this job was awesome because I used to do a lot of partying and would get home at 6 AM and have to be at work around 8 AM. So because I didn't have to show face or do much work, it was perfect. As Goofy I snuck on rides. One day I went on one of the kiddie roller coasters and almost lost my head. I was eventually disapproved to play Goofy because he was starting to get a ghetto booty exact words from my supervisors. When you play the characters, you're 30 minutes on set, 30 minutes off. So in an 8-hour day you really worked 4 hours but you got paid for 8. If you talked in costume you'd get in serious trouble. The underground tunnel is real. Oh, and I eventually got fired for asking Joey Fatone back when NSYNC was on fire for a picture before my shift off the clock. LOL. The idea of a hungover Tigger amusing kids makes me laugh. I went there with my dad, who was working for a radio station at the time. Disney was opening a new ride and doing the press rollout, and invited the radio station there, so I guess you could think of him as a temporary employee. One of the crew spilled soda on a mic, and asked the Disney guy helping the crew where he could look for a replacement locally. He assumed Disney would have spare mics, but he was worried about getting the random special snowflake of a microphone the DJ insisted on. The Disney guy just laughed and took him to the underworld. They had rooms full of TV radio equipment new in the box. They have spares from every brand conceivable, by the dozen. Millions and millions of dollars worth of it, just sitting there collecting dust most of the time, just in case. When Disney wants to be prepared, they don't frick around. Made a new account just for this thread. I am a former Disney World Resort employee. I worked as a concierge at a deluxe resort but sometimes had shifts at a value moderate level resort. I came across a lot of famous and crazy people. Let me know if you have any questions. Government officials, including POTUS, normally stay at the Contemporary because it is the most secure resort. Celebrities want to stay in Cinderella's castle but Disney has denied some of them based on how messy they have left hotel rooms before. Cast members see lots of famous people every day. all the time bragging about who you know to try to get free stuff from people. Getting paid minimum wage won't get you too far. On the flip side, Disney gives out a lot of money if you complain enough to the right cast member at your resort, especially when staying at a deluxe resort. There is a good chance you will get money back. Disney has a huge budget for this. When the Polynesian was under major construction, just coming off this now, they give out a lot of money to angry guests who didn't do research ahead of time. If you are nice to the cast members, they will go out of their way to make magic. I often sent up chocolates or gave extra fast passes to nice guests. If you are mean to cast members, you better believe we are putting notes on your reservation. Disney has a lot of computer systems and they track crazy guests' behavior. When you come up to the desk and scan your magic band, I will be warned if you have yelled or been out of line to another cast member. And that is across the board. All the Disney resorts use the same system. As for craziest stories, I have been asked where to get drugs, where to go to get prostitutes, and I also had a guest that ended up being a con woman. I have also had guests pass me their phone number. I can only imagine how bad it is for the princesses. You definitely learn a lot about people and grow thick skin working for Disney. I think that experience helped me get my current job, but also allowed me to have newfound respect in what may be the most difficult customer service industry around. Let me know if you have questions. Whoa, I didn't know Magic Band allowed for employees to make a note that you were a dong. That is so cool. My first day as a CP, college program intern, working at the Magic Kingdom in Jan. 2005. After all the tours and fun stuff and exploring the tunnels, I had a meal at the Mouseketeria cafeteria and had my eye on Cinderella and some other princess, maybe Snow White. While I ate, they were mad. After the meal, I went out to wait for the bus back to the parking lot around the same time they left. Now keep in mind, characters aren't allowed to keep their costumes on as soon as they're off stage, so the princesses typically walked around in tank tops and short pajama shorts, but the with wig and full makeup. So I'm waiting for the bus and Cinderella and Snow White are full on crap talking some s who slept with one of their boyfriends while chain smoking. Turns out, they were talking about a girl who played Ariel. Seriously, 21-year-old me was in total shock because it was my first day and knew it could only get better from there. And it did. Like the time Aladdin and Peter Pan were making out on one of the tables in the same Mouseketeria. Or the time I saw Mickey Mouse give someone the finger underground directly after a parade. It's hot in those costumes. She was probably justified. Or the time a different Cinderella got really peeved because Paris Hilton was visiting the park that day and didn't go to see her. On the bus back to the lot, she was like, "I'm freaking Cinderella. Why wouldn't she come find me? Oh man." Good times, good times. Like the time Aladdin and Peter Pan were making out on one of the tables in the same Mouseketeria. If this was in 2006, late 2005, then that might have been me. I am not an employee, but this is a customer service story. When I was about 9, my grandfather died, who had a Disney pass with some type of credit and such on it, but we went down to Disney on a trip and we were intending to move them off his card and onto my parents' cards. Well, this was still a sad time for me as me and my grandfather were really close, so I went outside while they dealt with all the stuff. While I was out there was a security guard playing with toys and entertaining kids that were in the same position I was, with the parents being inside and not wanting to be in there. But he saw me being rather down and sad about everything and came over to me, asked what was wrong, and as I explained, he became visibly sad as well. He told me that his grandfather had died a few years back and they were close as well. He gave me a few pins that were like the special ones with the little silver Mickey head on them and said he would get my family into the special area in Epcot to watch the fireworks. Which he did, and it completely made the trip for my family. I still have those pins because they are one of the coolest things I've ever gotten from someone. When I lived in Orlando, I knew a woman that played Tinkerbell. She described the audition to me once, and it's pretty intense. First, you have to be incredibly tiny and light because your job involves you riding a zip line each evening from the top of Sleeping Beauty's castle, Cinderella's castle, to the top of a restaurant in Tomorrowland. And if you're heavy, things could get messy. The final part of the audition involves being suspended from a 100-foot crane for like 2 hours to ensure that you aren't afraid of heights. The girls that get this far tend to drop like flies at that stage, many of them in hysterics after about 20 minutes. I had a lot of friends who worked there, many of them characters, and it was apparently a really tough job. That would be tough even if you weren't afraid of heights. Does it count if it's a different amusement park? The one I worked at has one of those sudden drop rides. A coworker found a single screw on the ground and they closed down the ride for days as they went over every inch of the ride. Turns out it was a screw that could have led to a seat opening and rider falling out if it hadn't been discovered. At Disney parks, all the screws on the rides have paint on them and where they're attached as a seal, so they can see if the screw is loose or not. At least with that, they could tell if the screw belonged to the ride or not. Most likely get buried at this point, but I remember once I was leaving the park. You know how it gets ridiculously crowded at the exits when the park is shutting down. I got elbowed and got a bloody nose. All of a sudden the staff swooped in and took me to the underground tunnels, then to a golf cart that brought us to our car. Definitely a quick exit. You should have played dead. Everyone in your family would have gotten lifetime passes. Person I went to school with has had a job with security there. She eventually got married and had children. WDW hired her husband and the kids. They walk patrol around as a family. As far as I know, they still work there. Good guy Disney right there. So one thing I gather from this thread is that guests in the park are watched constantly. Is it accurate to assume that if I'm in a restroom stall and run out of toilet paper, a hand in a Mickey Mouse glove will instantly reach under the door offering a fresh roll? I worked at the DLR in Anaheim. I won't say which department. Still afraid of Gestapo Disney HR people. I found an unattended lunch pail that was almost certainly harmless. Knowing how much of a stickler that Disney is with security concerns, I decided to call it in. Within 2 minutes, they had 3 security cars blocking off the area I was in and the Pluto, drug and bomb sniffing dogs that assist security teams deployed to sniff the bag. My supervisor's supervisor questioned me for 30 minutes about the situation, told me there was a commendation on my record, and then let me go home early for the day. After that, I figured out the secret to it: hidden security people in the park, as they were the first to approach me after the radio call. If they have a Bluetooth headset in, they're undercover security. TLDR. Don't frick with the mouse. He sees all. I don't work there, but had a relevant experience. The stories about underground passageways and secret police are 100% true. Was in the Magic Kingdom for a band trip in high school, hanging out with a few friends. One guy, we'll call him Jack, decided it'd be a good idea to shoplift some keychains from one of the stores. This being Disney, there were probably 50 different security cameras that saw this. A few minutes later we're walking through a crowded area when someone gave me a flat tire and we stop. 2 big guys are behind us and quietly tell Jack that he needs to go with them, and tell the rest of us to let our band director know he needs to get in touch with security. They walk Jack over behind one of the stores where there's a cast members only door, and disappear behind it. Later Jack told us they took him underground, where he sat in a security room for the rest of the day where he was charged with shoplifting. They threw the book at him. They don't tolerate that crap at all. He got a huge fine and had to do community service in Florida. We lived in the Northeast. In retrospect, I have a huge amount of respect and a small amount of terror for how Disney handled the situation. They were incredibly subtle with the whole flat tire thing, and how they quietly avoided making a scene. People walking past us had no idea what was going on. I know it sounds silly, but that experience alone probably helped me understand how terrifying and effective secret police in places like the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany were better than anything we ever learned in class. They are serious about the bought keychains. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.